Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cities Skylines, where we are building the city of Delta Coast. In the last episode, we spent quite a bit of time cleaning up this old factory area, and now it's turned into quite a booming area where we have lots of high-density residences, a nice park, a big node of commercial activity, and some low-density residences. There used to be lots of pollution here, and now it's all gone. I'm really thrilled about that. We're going to dive right in and complete this neighborhood because we can now place down low-density residential without really worrying about the pollution affecting us. Sometimes you may inadvertently zone areas like this when you use the fill tool, so I'm going to go back and dezone that. Adding in that low-density residential will help us get to our 11,000 population milestone, which for us will help unlock the ability to interact with trains. I'm really excited about that because in the last episode, to put this tram line down, we had to delete this train track. Today I want to play with both the train station so we can get some tourists into the city, as well as deal with the cargo train terminal so that we can basically build some freight access for our industrial areas. In addition to building out this neighborhood, I do really want to give some thought to the educational demands that we have. We have quite a few areas of the city where we just don't have enough educated workers, and that's causing buildings to be abandoned, and I'd like to avoid that if possible. So let's quickly revisit our education. Looking at this area, over here, it is high density. We do have an elementary school over here, but I know from experience that, even in the 4, 5, or 6 blocks of high density over here, there's quite a few people living there, and that's just going to require extra attention in terms of schooling. So what I'd like to do is consider placing an elementary school over here next to all of our other educational uses. I think maybe putting an elementary school right next to the university would make a lot of sense. And that takes care of our elementary school demand, but we do have a need for high school availability as well. We aren't quite at the point of exceeding that capacity, but we will exceed it soon. So what I think makes sense is to place another high school. We do have this large area over here, and if I've learned anything playing this game, it's that we'll have, likely by the end of this episode, a large amount of residential demand. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and build out this neighborhood. We did frame it last episode with the tram line, and so I'd like to go in and figure out what the rest of that neighborhood's going to look like. I'm going to make sure to put a high school in there and likely elementary schools as well, just so that we can really take care of that educational gap. So you all have seen me build neighborhoods before. You know what types of city services that we'll need. I'm going to try to build this neighborhood out without really talking through much, and I'm just going to be placing down the typical things that we need. And with that, we have reached our population milestone of 11,000. As mentioned, one of the big things we are looking for in this unlock is the train station and cargo train terminal. That will give us the ability to place those stations as well as edit the train tracks. There are some other things that come with this unlock, but we aren't going to be getting into them today or really for a while, so they aren't super relevant. But I am excited to start modifying the train tracks later in this episode. For now, I'm going to get back to building out the rest of this area. One of the things that we can do is consider alternative healthcare options. Now we have thought about, we have placed childcare or elder care and childcare in the past. I think we won't build any of that here, but rather than plopping down a hospital or a medical clinic, what I want to do is consider some of the alternative options we have available. In a different area, we placed the community pool. I believe we placed that over here some other time. I could be wrong. No, there it is. There's the community pool. So I do want to try some of the other things available to us. The yoga garden sounds like a nice option to me because it helps supplement some of that medical capacity and is, a little bit of an interesting option. The sauna as well, I think will help take care of some of that healthcare and is just a nice alternative to the medical clinic. So I think that looks good. I am wondering why the streets are not showing up as green as if they had, healthcare coverage. So I will want to look into that. Maybe it is appropriate to place a hospital down here just to be sure, because I'm noticing that will illuminate the streets green, and I think I'd be a little bit worried if we didn't take care of that. So I'm going to place that building. I'd have to take out some paths, but I think that placing it here would be fairly reasonable. Yeah, that looks okay, even though we took out some paths for it. And some other coverage we might want to think about. We don't have fantastic fire coverage in this area, so I think this would be a reasonable place to have a large firehouse. Again, not on the collector, but slightly adjacent to it would be desired. Now, with police coverage, I think we're in a good spot. And I do want to probably over-index on education. Now, one thing we want to think about is we'd previously set this area, Mill Park, to have the policy of schools out, which means that folks in this district will prefer to work over basically going to study. I want to remove that because we initially did that to encourage folks to flock over to this industry area. That served us well for a while. But due to the educational problems we're seeing in the city, I think it makes sense to get those folks educated. So to help support that, I am going to place an elementary school in here. I think that we want to take out as little homes as possible. Maybe somewhere like that would be okay. And we definitely want to place a few in this area. Let's start with the one right there, and then maybe another over here. And then, as mentioned before, I definitely want to place a high school as well. So overall, our elementary coverage and high school coverage look great. And the last thing to think about is going to be our parks. So one thing we haven't placed yet is the park with trees. This is a little bit of a larger asset, and we'll need to probably take out some paths and maybe streets for it. But finding a good spot for it, I think, would be a good move, just because it's a really nice thing to place. Maybe over here would be a good spot. We'll have to reconfigure where the yoga garden lives. Maybe it can live right next to that park. I think that looks great. And one thing we can think about with the park is it does have the built-in path connections. So I will place those to make sure it's well connected to the rest of our roadway system. This will encourage folks to, visit the park and walk to it, which would be great. So I think we have good coverage of, normal city services in this area, and we can get started zoning. I'm going to, as always, follow the traditional pattern of zoning along the collector, and I'm going to have this be all low density residential with a few exceptions of some, commercial nodes. Now, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do in this area bordering the arterial, so I'm going to leave that open. I think it's best to just leave that space open and figure out what to do with it later. But I did plop down quite a bit of low-density residential, and that should satisfy a lot of the demand we're seeing. So, I don't think I'm going to build out any new areas with a lot of residences, and this will be kind of the big neighborhood we build today. So I think that will help, add some land value into this area. And, I think we're already seeing some of that. So I'm going to leave that be and focus on some other stuff for the rest of the episode. At this point, one thing I'd really like to think about doing is placing our cargo train terminal. We unlocked it at the 11,000 population milestone, and I think it's something that's going to help our city to grow. And placing it now will help kind of give us a good expansion into a new area that I've been planning. So there are two major collectors that are kind of dangling right now, and I want to do something about that. There's this collector that we decided would cross the river at some point and help us expand into this area. And then we also have this collector over here, and we aren't doing anything with those. And I think it would make sense to close the loop on those today, as well as make use of this rail that's over here and build, a cargo train terminal. The reason why I think this would be a good location is the purpose that the cargo train terminal serves is it helps to get goods into your city through the rail tracks, as opposed to having goods be forced to come in through the highway. So right now, if we have a business over here that needs goods, those goods currently have to come from the highway, and they have to either go through our city and interfere with our traffic, or come through the arterial, which isn't super bad. But if we were to place a cargo train terminal over here, that just gives another option for goods to enter into our city, and that over time will help with traffic flow. Another reason why that's important is we have been seeing issues over in our farm area. Of course, there are none right now, but from time to time I've seen complaints from some buildings saying that there isn't enough demand for a good to be sold. So, right now we're selling all of our goods, but sometimes they pile up and we aren't able to, sell them to the outside world. One of the mechanics that governs that is the outside connections. And right now we only have two. It's this highway over here and the highway all the way down here. And my understanding of this mechanic is, the more outside connections you have, the more of a desire a desire the outside world has to purchase goods, because they can be sold to various other regions. So if we connect our city up through the cargo train terminal, then I'm imagining that some of the goods over here will be able to take the collector and load the goods onto the train and then sell them, to the outside world via the train tracks, which also go to the outside of the map. So I'm going to try building a bridge over here and building a bridge over here and having a collector that doesn't hug the shoreline, but is fairly close. And we do have some terrain challenges, so what I'm going to do is, after I build the bridge, try to shape some of this land so that we can have a nice area over here that doesn't have terrain challenges. Okay, and now we have this collector. I think my long-term plan is to have this collector head off in this direction, kind of perpendicular to the shore. So, if we were to place something like this, then we can meet up with that. And that kind of sets us off in a good direction. I like that. And what I'm imagining now is because I want to build out some of this area over here, I don't like the terrain that we're dealing with. So I'm going to use the landscaping tool and push a lot of that terrain back so that this whole area is flat. What I'm thinking, I'm not going to build it this episode, but in a future episode, I want to take advantage of our fishing assets and build a nice fishing industry over in this area. So that's something that we can explore later. For now, I'm going to push this train back and then have my collector kind of follow along and intersect over here somewhere. But I think that that looks, reasonable. It's not such a, crazy slope over here. And we'll probably revisit some of this slope. Maybe we can take it back right now. But we'll revisit, the rest of this later on. And so what we can do now is put that collector back in place. I apologize for deleting it, but yeah, we can do that. Meet back up with it. And then we can have this collector do what we initially wanted it to do. So first things first, we'll have it touch down. And then have it, kind of cut through over here and intersect with that at a 90-degree angle. And I'm okay with this taking, a few turns. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I think it'll make this area kind of interesting, to be honest. Fantastic. I think that's pretty unique, and I am inclined to go with it. Now, what I want to do now is figure out a way to work in some cargo rail. And again, I think that this is a really ideal location because freight coming in here will be able to easily access this area over here through the bridge, and then also this area over here. I think that's definitely what we want to go with. So I'm going to find a way to place that and then build some train tracks that end up going into that area. One thing I am noticing is we are just still having lots of abandoned buildings, and it's all because of these worker issues. So one thing we can do is in our city policies, turn on the educational boost throughout the city. What it will do is it'll increase our educational budget by 25%. We are currently paying, $4,800, so increasing that by another $1,000 is certainly not going to bankrupt us. And what it will do is it will prioritize education over working for young adults. We do not have a worker shortage. We don't have tons of industry demand. So I really think that this is the right move for now. Hopefully that will help remedy some of the pipeline issues we're seeing. Just to double check on this, I think I'm going to go back to the educational window from time to time. I think one of the problems is, we've zoned a lot of new industry and residential and commercial. And with that, we have uneducated citizens, and it takes a while for them to get educated. So as we continue to build out our city, this may happen as we, continue to plop down new neighborhoods kind of wholesale. So we should just keep an eye on that. I am going to try to, work in that cargo terminal over here, though. And we do have some train challenges over here, so, maybe what we can do is push the elevation back kind of over here, or even really just flatten a lot of this out and rebuild the train tracks. So I think that's the move that we're going to do today. Okay, I think that was worth it. We now have a really nice flat area to work with. Sorry if that feels really cheap. We did have quite a surplus of funds, and that did bring us down to 200,000. So we're in a spot now where we do have to pay a little bit closer attention to money, which I'm actually fine with. I appreciate that, and I'd rather, not have unlimited money. Let's build some stuff out, and I'm gonna, start dealing with the railroad in a few minutes. And what I'm going to do to cross this road is set the height a little bit low to the lowest setting, so that when I press page up and page down on my keyboard, it only goes up one click. Otherwise, it'll go up quite a bit, which I don't want. And to connect these up, what I'm going to do is just use the curve road tool, the curve track tool, and make a nice smooth connection like that. And that should be more than sufficient. Okay, so after a bit of playing, I think that I settled on something that doesn't look awful, and we'll just have to go with that for now. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that these segments of road are connected up. So I'm going to do the same thing over here and, cross that collector. Okay, that looks good to me. And so now the train track that we had to break earlier is now connected. So we should have clear paths from that exit of the city to the other exit. And this is now connected to the cargo train terminal. So that took quite a bit of work just to get that set, but I'm pretty happy with where we are. Let's connect up water and then, see that cargo train terminal in action. We'll fill in this area later again with our fishing industry and other uses over here. So, I am seeing that our electricity and water is kind of cutting it a little close. Yeah, we should bump up our electricity and we should bump up our water. I think both of those can just be done by increasing our budget. That should buy us some time before we have to place new buildings. So there are some things that I want to think about that we didn't get to last episode, and if you remember, we had a fire and we placed our fire helicopter depot. I wanted to talk about the other types of depots we can place. To supplement medical coverage, we have a medical helicopter depot. And also to supplement police coverage, we have a police helicopter depot. So what I think we should do is place both of those buildings in the same area as we placed our fire helicopter depot. I think all of those uses, should live together. And I think this area is a great spot for them just because they don't generate a lot of trips. They don't need great, road access. And this is not a super desirable part of the city to live in or anything. I don't see us building any residences or shops or anything over here. So that's why I'm sticking with this. So we got our medical and we have our police. And I think that looks great. We'll probably start to see some helicopters spawn and, do their job. And look at that. We have some police helicopters already going out to, let's see, working shift. They're searching for criminals. Awesome. I think each has a capacity of 3. So, that should definitely help. Another thing that I'd like to do, just because, it might be a fun building challenge, would be to place a prison. And so the prison is interesting because what it does is it basically holds criminals. And in our police department view, you can see we have 48 detained criminals and a jail's capacity of 100. That jail's capacity is coming from our police stations. So, the police station has slots for 20 criminals. In the larger police departments, I believe hold a bit more, 60. But the prison is a facility that will help, it says it will help rehabilitate, criminals. And so I think somewhere in this area would be a great spot to place a prison that will get the criminals out of the holding cells in the police stations and free those up for more, local, local uses of holding criminals. So, we basically want 20 slots in here so that we can always, put people in jail and then transfer them over to the prison if need be. So I like the idea of continuing off of this area and maybe even expanding onto this island. The reason I say it'll be a fun building challenge is we don't exactly have room for the prison. So what I'd like to do is, try to figure out how we can shape this island and build room for it so that it makes sense. I'm going to try to do that right now by first building a road over there. So let's try to get something that that works for us. So let's look at, the shape of the prison and figure out what works best. I think if we were to maybe make use of this existing kind of beachfront and maybe build the prison in an area over here, we could have the road sweep around here and then use the prison slot over there, or use that spot for the prison over there. So I'm going to be really, really fine-grained with the building over here. I'm going to delete that bridge, sadly, just to make some room. I'm going to maybe flatten some stuff out, but also, expand this area just a little bit, just to make some room. Okay, and if we build a road over here, I'm interested to see if the prison will fit. So maybe a straight road like that. That doesn't look too bad. Awesome. And I don't mind it being right next to the water pumping station and the wind turbine. That's okay. It's not supposed to be a super desirable place to live or anything. And so it's requesting water. Okay, cool. So it's not flooding. So I'm going to go back to maybe building that bridge. And instead of building it right there, maybe I can aim for, this location, just so I have a lot more, bandwidth to slope my roads down a little bit. Okay, that's not perfect, but I think I like it. What we're seeing is that the prison is already sending out police vans, which are basically going to grab criminals from this police station. That's exactly what we want, and I really like kind of where that is. Now, one thing we can do to help, decorate this is place what are called keys. I've never understood the pronunciation. They look like they would be pronounced quay, but a key is basically a key wall, and that will help, frame the island so that there's a nice barrier between the island and the water. Okay, so that took a little bit of work, but we have kind of our prison island shaped up. I am going to use the landscaping tool around it just to make sure that we don't have any of these, bits kind of hanging out, and that it looks nice and clean around the edges. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. It is going to disrupt the water flow in this area, so I will expect it to go a little crazy for a second, but that will settle in a minute. That's just how the water simulation in the game works. It doesn't really know what to do with it, but that will that'll fix itself in a minute, which is totally cool. We should try to see if we can get the road to connect now. So the need for water is taken care of, but we did have a flooded street, and it looks like the water's mostly settled. Might take another minute or so. We did just disrupt the flow of water around here, so I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of took a minute. But generally, that looks pretty good to me. I'm really happy with how that turned out. maybe a little bit of decoration might help. And it looks like we have 16 out of 500 prisoners in here. That capacity will serve our city as it grows to basically as big as we'll take it. So that'll help us, manage prisoners in the city. And I think that we won't really need to revisit that. One thing that we can do is check out our cargo train terminal in action. And it looks like we actually have 2 trains coming in pretty full at the same time. When they unload, what that's going to do is create and spawn some freight vehicles, which are then going to deliver goods inside of our city. So, if we stop and follow one of these, it's going to take goods to the organic food market, and it's going to take this path right here. So it's doing exactly what we wanted it to do, using this collector as kind of a main freight corridor and bringing goods into the city. Now, this might not be a huge difference, but this just alleviates some of the need for vehicles to come in through the highway. Although this is actually closer to the highway, and this may be a less desirable motion than, coming in through the highway, I think mixing things up is good. Otherwise we have all of our freight coming in over here, which isn't super great. So yeah, I think I'm pretty pleased with how that's working. If we check on our intersections, I do actually like this, although this is a local road. I do like this being a traffic light, just so we can have large waves of cars all flow through kind of at once instead of all stopping individually. So I am inclined to say that makes sense for us right now. We can revisit that later if we need to. One thing I would like to do before we go any further is address this area. Now, what I'm noticing is that these buildings, which are zoned as high density residential, are getting quite large. I never intended for them to be this large. I think some of these buildings look way more appropriate in a downtown type setting, which this certainly is not intended to be that. We do have control over this, and we can ban high rises through the policy high rise ban. I'm going to apply this at the city level, and what that means is anytime we want skyscrapers or tall buildings, we will have to create districts and intentionally opt out of the high-rise ban, which is what we want. By default, I do not want skyscrapers in our city. So adding in that policy will unfortunately take down a lot of these buildings, especially those that have exceeded that high-rise ban, and we'll have to build new buildings in their place. But it will set a nice upper limit as far as how tall these buildings can get. And that's certainly desired. I don't want, this area to get too out of hand. So let's just make sure the rest of the buildings get kind of de-zoned. Okay, and it looks like most of the super tall buildings have left, and, new buildings are starting to take their place, which is desired. So I'm happy with that. One last thing we can do today is maybe consider how we're going to handle the passenger rail. Now, we do have this rail line coming through, and I think with our tram and our bus routes, this would be actually a pretty desirable area to have a train stop come in. And what that will do is draw visitors to our city, tourists that can go and visit different destinations and generate income for us. So right now we do have tourists coming in, but again, similar to our freight previously, they're all coming in through the highway. And so, if we can diversify the way that goods and citizens are coming into our town, then that will put us in a good spot. So I'm going to first take a look at the terrain. There are some terrain challenges in this area that I do want to address. So, we can give some thought to what that's going to look like. I think what I do want is to have another collector coming through here just to support all this traffic, and have this collector come up from this rotary and then eventually make its way over here at this intersection. Okay, we'll make some, local roadway connections for sure. But now what I care about is our train terminal. So what I want to make sure is that we have enough room to build that out. So now that we have our collector down, I think we can be a little bit more aggressive with, kind of building out that plateau so we have enough room. The idea is I'm not going to be building anything right here, and this will be kind of a sudden cliff and drop off. And I actually like the idea of it being kind of abrupt. We'll put some landscaping right there, but I think having that kind of plateau out and looking really abrupt actually kind of looks cool. And what I want to do is place a train station. And one thing I didn't do is really give myself a ton of room to really loop back and connect with the train. So I'm kind of rethinking the design of this. I think we'd want, want this to be over here, which would mean we'd need a road to be somewhere around here. Yeah, great. So if I place that, then it's just a matter of connecting up these roads, which is certainly doable. Or roads, train tracks. And I like redundant connections, so I'm gonna, start to loop some things on our more major roadways. So even though there's nothing over here that requires water, I think it's worth it to just, loop it back. Okay, so now a lot of stuff is looped. And we still don't have water where we actually needed it, so we should add that. I really like this for a couple of reasons, but I think that'll be really, really neat. So we have a train station, which is allowing intercity trains. So it's just a matter of time before we get a train that comes into this terminal and drops off some passengers, or vice versa. We can get some citizens that go to this train station to leave the city, which is totally cool. So that will certainly be a thing. Something we can do either now or in the future, haven't decided yet, is build out the rest of this neighborhood. Because we have good roadway access and we don't have a ton of demand, I don't think we need to build that out quite yet. So maybe we leave that as is. I do want to check on the intersections. That does not need to be a traffic light. And I just want stop signs over here as usual. And that is most definitely a traffic light, whereas that should be a stop sign. So I think that's all around pretty appropriate for what we want to do. And we are just still seeing, some education issues. So I'm wondering what's going on. Our elementary schools are great. Our high schools should be good, but it's just taking a long time for citizens to get educated. And university's good. So yeah, we're just gonna have to wait this out. I guess it takes a long time for people to get educated. And we have placed down quite a bit of residences, in this episode. So we'll just have to see what happens in time. One other use that is very similar to this train station that we haven't talked about yet is the intercity bus station. And the reason I care about that is, folks may want to take a coach bus in or out of the city. And I think this will be a great way for us to increase our overall tourism. So if I place that over here, then I think that we can really, really attract some coach buses over here, and get some folks into our city. So, that will just start to work automatically and do its thing. One thing we can do to further enhance this area, though, is, we are bringing folks into the city, but there's nothing over here. So we can maybe make some of this area a popular kind of tourist destination. Maybe we'll do that in a future episode, because with our worker education problems, we're just going to make it worse by placing commercial. So maybe what we can do to kind of solidify that idea is at least create a district over here and flag it in the commercial tab as a tourism specialization. And what this will do is anytime we place down a commercial building in this area, it will be like a tourist specialized commercial building. Another thing that we can do to help this area is going to be placing an additional bus route. So, we do have good tram access. We do have a decent bus route over here, but what we don't have is a way for these citizens to get further into our city. So I like the idea of placing another bus route, maybe through this neighborhood and into this area over here, with the sole purpose of, having a nice loop so that we can drive some additional traffic over here. And I think what we're seeing, oh, I was wrong. I thought this was a passenger train. So what I'm going to do is build out a road network, a very, very rough road network in here so that we can make a nice loop with our buses. Now this is definitely a pretty funky neighborhood, but I like that, and we're going to start doing, more of this and deviating from, the kind of the grid pattern that we've established, just because I think it'll make things a bit more interesting. So the reason we built this road network was to support the buses that we want to build, or the bus route we want to build, so I'm going to start with that. So I think it makes sense for us to either come in through the collector or come in through a local road. Because we have the trams coming in through here already, I think it makes sense to come in through the collector. So I'm going to commit to that. And one of the benefits we get from this station is we can actually add a stop directly in the intercity terminal so that we have a really, really nice and direct interchange between local and intercity buses. And I'm just noticing that there's a nice crowd of folks that are leaving both of these stations. So that's extra tourist income. A lot of these folks are getting in their cars and driving away. And one of the ways we can help remove the need for those cars is by building, local bus connections. Otherwise, this is going to be a pretty high trafficked area, by vehicles, which we want to avoid. So, let's just continue this line and place that stop. And I want to continue through this neighborhood and, find a way to loop back. So I think we'll continue down here. And then end up over here, probably. And then maybe we can make a nice lap around after going by the park. I think that would be a nice tourist destination, so bringing folks over there would probably be a good idea. And I think that makes sense. And then one last stop before we connect up. And we'll now do the same thing in reverse. And one unfortunate thing is, due to the way that turns are made in this game, I can't turn from the right side of the road, I can't turn into the station. So what I'm going to do instead is compromise and say that a bus stop right here is sufficient. And, I think folks will walk from either of these stations to that bus stop. Okay, and we have both of those lines set, and we should see some buses start to come out from the bus depot to kind of fulfill those lines. Now I do want to name them so we can start tracking them. And I think what we're going to go with is probably calling them the intercity line, and we'll color it red. Looks great. It'll be a while before, before those buses scatter, but I think that was a good move overall. If we click in here, it looks like 0 passengers served last week. I'd be interested to see that go up. 61 passengers served last week. Fantastic. I kind of want to see a train come in here and see folks, disperse. All right, and we do have a train coming in, and it has 124 passengers that it's dropping off. That's significant. I really, really like that. So folks get off, and hopefully they, decide to hop on, the bus lines that we have, which would be great. I want to see, not a ton of cars leaving the station, because that will be bad for traffic. I don't want to, by adding this train station, I don't want to add a ton of, vehicle traffic as a result. So let's check up on our transit to see how that's doing. Our trams are seeing quite a few passengers. What I'm going to look for is to make sure that none of these stops are really overburdened. I don't see any of that here. And let's look at the same loop in reverse. This stop is getting slammed, and that stop is right over here. So, this just might be a popular part of town. It's also fairly dense. So one mode of transportation we can look at in the future to help break some of that up is going to be the metro, which is higher capacity than the tram. So, it's a bit different, similar to road hierarchy. We want to consider transit hierarchy. And so, the metro is going to take fewer stops, but it will get folks from, this area down here, and then all the way down here in the future. So that might be, a nice central line that we can consider building in the future. Let's go back to visiting our window. I think that tram looks okay aside from that one stop. The other stops look good. Buses, if we look at the Old Town loop, there is one stop that's getting slammed. It's this stop right here, which is, in a fairly central part of town. And I do want to check out the Old Town in reverse. The Old Town in reverse is really getting hammered. We have that stop right there. I think we always knew that was going to be a big stop. We have this stop right next to it. So I'm imagining, these are the two closest stops, roughly, to our industry area. So it's possible that folks are just having a tough time getting to the industry area, for their jobs. That's probably a really, really desired, point of access. Just judging by the flow of people we see going over here, it's probable that we need to really consider, how to get folks over here. So, okay, I just did a lot of talking. I think we've done a lot today, and maybe this is a good spot to end. I think in the future we can build out this neighborhood, explore different modes of transit, and maybe start to either build our fishing industry or build a little bit further down and, build that nature reserve that we've been talking about. Maybe that will be a nice build for, when we have some spare time. So as always, thank you for watching another episode of Delta Coast, and definitely stay tuned for more content.